Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Adventures Travel Club television show. Betty, we find ourselves today back in the beautiful city of Bergen, Norway.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, did you realize that Dr. Hansen was from Bergen? Now, you're going to say, okay, now who's Dr. Hansen?
No.
You know
that
the
I
answer
know.
to that, right?
Yeah.
What is the
He's
answer?
a tremendous man, a wonderful man. Found I don't know whether it was a cure, or whether
He
it actually identified Hansen's disease, which is
right.
leprosy.
And so that says a lot here. And then one of the hospitals is here too, where he used to work.
Is this where he did the culturing and all of that?
I believe
right
so.
here.
I believe so. Anyway, we're going to. This will be our final time here in Bergen, which is too bad because you could spend a lot of time here. But let's find out a little bit more about it, shall we?
And then you can also see these toll booths, and if you want to drive into the city centre of Bergen on a weekday, you have to pay this toll from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. 5 krona per car and 10 for a bus.
Toll roads here in the West seem to be a little bit foreign to us because we've got so many free roads, but there are more toll roads coming up even in the United States. Now, this was a southern entrance to the city, and that was a toll station there in the early days. And the farmers, when they were bringing their produce and things into the city, they had to stop at that particular point and pay the toll.
So this toll system, that's how we finance most new bridges, tolls and roads in Norway these days. Everything is financed through toll.
Betty, have you ever been on a toll road in Southern California? You know,
No, I haven't, but I have been on the toll bridge in San Francisco.
Hey, weren't they supposed to take the toll off of that at one time?
Oh, sure, but did you ever hear them taking the taxes off of anything?
Nope. No, probably not. Well, anyway, from what she says, it does work here in Norway, which is really great to make all the improvements. So that's very nice, and I'm glad that we don't have to pay a toll.
Yeah, but I have
going
no
up and down the
objection.
highway, you know?
I have no objection to tolls on highways if they would use it for the roads.
And if you look to your front and right, you can see a green church tower. This is today we only have 3 medieval churches left, and this is one of the medieval, and this is our cathedral up to the right. To the right, you can also see our new police station. And I said that Bergen is the city between 7 mountains. And if you look up on your right-hand side, up on your left-hand side, a few seconds, you can see what we call the 8th mountain to the left. This is our new town hall, the highest building in Bergen, 14 stories high. And it's not big enough currently because we still have to use the old town hall. And the City Council of Bergen has 85 members, that's the legal maximum. And our mayor, he belongs to the Christian Democrats. Well, it's really a socialistic coalition, but he belongs to the Christian Democrats. And so we're back down in the city centre, and
on the cobblestones.
queues everywhere. And this is then the part of the city I told you about earlier, which was destroyed after the fire in 1916. Yes. And if you look up on the mountain to the front and right there, this is the mountain where the funicular goes. And you see all the trees up here. And 100 years ago, there were no trees up on the hillside here. So all the trees up there, they were planted 100 years ago. And there are these very good sort of country roads going down from the mountain here, winding. And you can see the trees they are planted sort of along the sides of these roads, going left, right, left, right.
Well, that'd be something. There'd be a lot of switchbacks on those road up there. It's interesting though, just 100 years ago that there were no trees up there.
Reforestation is a marvelous thing.
And they really do it there too, you know. Well, here we are back at the fish market, back at the harbor, and we can see those the gabled houses over there on the other side. And at one time they were also on this side of the harbor too, but when they burned down, they didn't rebuild them that way. But it's a beautiful area, isn't it? This is the picture postcard thing that we all take a look at. It's really nice. And let's talk about the boats, which we love to talk about, naturally.
And these catamarans are built here in Western Norway. And we export a few too. and we export some to the United States, and we've even exported some to Hong Kong now. And you can see for yourself, there's only modern buildings out here too. But these modern buildings, they have another explanation. On the 20th of April 1944, that is during World War II, there was a big explosion here in the Bergen Harbour. And it was a Dutch ship under German command that came into the harbour area, and the ship was loaded with explosives. And if we had known that they had this amount of explosives on board, they would never have been let into the harbour area. But we didn't know, so in they came, and during some reparations there was a fire and the entire ship exploded. The area here was completely destroyed. The fortifications on the other side, they were destroyed. And the explosion was in fact so powerful that part of the anchor belonging to this Dutch ship landed on top of the mountain to the right. And these parts are still up there as a memorial. And in this explosion, 100 people were killed, and more than 5,000 people, they suffered various head and eye injuries due to all the windows.
Boy, that ship must have had an awful lot of explosives on it. So that part of the ship landed clear up there on top of the mountain on the other side.
I just can't believe that. With why everybody wasn't killed, why the whole thing wasn't destroyed. I know, but and then it blocked the harbor. I mean, it just destroyed it for I don't know.
I wondered, and I wondered if that was part of the things that were probably sabotaged, whether that was the resistance or whatever. You know.
No, I don't think so. I read something
just a natural
about
explosion?
that. That was a natural explosion. Because they really didn't know that there was any ammunition on that ship, and at that point, I think things were going pretty well. So,
well, it was.
Oh, who knows?
It was a big bang, right?
It was
big bang.
a big
Anyway,
bang.
It looks very peaceful now, though, doesn't it?
Yep. And
That's
I
very nice.
guess that you recover from these. Well, we know you recover from them, and you go back and you build even stronger.
And of course, though, the only thing is that some of the architecture that we're seeing right here, I mean, some of the newer stuff, it sure doesn't have the character that the older.
No, but it's probably a lot more functional and
so.
serving its purpose better than it did. We get nostalgic.
Who wants to look at function? Don't you like to look at something
sure,
that's
tourists do. But if you're going to be working there and making a living out of it, I think you would like to have something that's going to work better.
Well, maybe so. But that reminds me. Remember a long time ago when we were in Helsinki, in Finland, and I remember I was so amazed because there was a building that took up the whole block. I mean, and it was about a 7-8 story building. And our hotel wasn't very far from there, and you could look down on the thing, and they had knocked out everything. All they left were the outside walls that had all the gingerbread on it. I mean, the whole thing, built a new building on the inside.
Oh, they left the facade.
Yeah, they left the facade, but all the way around, the whole block. And so they were going to have a new, nice, modern building, and with to work inside, but yet it kept the character of the area that it was in, the character of the city. That was really very nice.
They've done that. There was another place that we went to, I think it was in Ireland, I think it's Dublin, where they took and used the old facades, but with the new buildings inside. And it's fun, like you say, it's to see how it was, and then to see what you can do behind behind the walls.
Behind the walls, right. Well, this is a fortification right here, and this is very interesting. This fortification that sits up above the harbor there, and guess what? A shot has never been fired from this fort.
Praise God. That's
that
wonderful. Maybe it's good to be prepared. If you're prepared, then things don't happen.
Evidently.
And of course, if you're prepared, they do happen. But at least you have defense.
Right. Our guide's going to tell us a little bit about a monastery that was up in this area, because they call this area Monastery Park. And however, the monastery during the Reformation was destroyed, and as it was in so many areas during the Reformation time. So let's listen to our guide a little bit more as she explains a bit about this particular area.
The park to the left here, by the way, is called the Monastery Park, because in the Middle Ages the richest monastery in Norway was placed on this ground. Unfortunately, this monastery was destroyed after the Reformation in 1536, and the park and the name is the only thing that remains. And today we still refer to this area up here as the monastery area. And there are many old houses in this area, and down to the right there are almost 500 houses dating back to the 19th century. And we'll show you a typical Bergen street down to the right between these two yellow houses. It's steep and narrow and paved with cobblestones, and the stones in the middle, they are tilted.
No problem. I'm used to that. Perfectly right.
And you can notice that most of the streets in the city centre here, they are actually paved with cobblestones rather than asphalt. And cobblestones looks much nicer. It's much more expensive, of course, and it can be tricky at winter time. And even when it rains, it can be difficult to drive on these cobblestones. They're very slippery. And good. The theatre up to the right and the square to the left then is named after the founder of our theatre. You see the statue in front of the theatre here is the Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen. And Henrik Ibsen here, he was the first director on the theatre. And perhaps you know some of his plays. Peer Gynt, Ghosts, A Doll's House.
Doll's House.
Yeah, that's Henrik Ibsen. And there's a new play on starting on December 13. It's called White Devils. Allowed to sell their goods directly from the ships. They had to unload them and then bring the goods into the house, and then they could trade. And this is sort of the little roof they had above the head, just to protect the goods from rain when it rained. And from 1350 till 1750. And the first 200 years they were here in Bergen, they had a monopoly on trade. And it may... And it may sound a bit strange that German merchants should have a monopoly on trade in Bergen, Norway, but there is a very simple explanation. Because in 1349 we had the Black Death, and between half and 2/3 of the Norwegian population died. And so the king was poor, he needed money, and the Germans, they could pay for special trade privileges. And in the Middle Ages we depended on this import of grain from Germany, because there is not much agriculture in Norway done, so we depended on this import of grain from the continent. But the most important export article, that was the dried codfish. And dried codfish was important because it's inexpensive, it's light. There was a population growth in Europe in the Middle Ages. There were new fast regulations from the Catholic Church, and they say that dried codfish can keep for more than 20 years. Yes. So they say, and we still export quite a lot of dried codfish, especially to Spain and Italy and Portugal. They have these special fish soups down there. It's a delicacy these days. And the area down here then was only for the Germans and only for men. There were strict borders around the entire area. And if you look at the houses, you can see that there are actually long rows of houses stretching from this quay down here and to the street up on the other side, where we started the sightseeing this morning. Yesterday. And and every house row then is divided up into smaller units, and the most prominent merchant, he would live in the front house. Those less prominent would have to live further back. And because all the houses here are built in wood, it was forbidden to cook or even to light a fire inside these wooden houses. And so they had to build separate kitchen houses, cook houses, on the other side of the wooden ones. And the oldest houses here, they were rebuilt after the fire in 1702. And the houses on the wharf, they are famous because they're old, and they're famous because every time they burnt down, they were rebuilt in the same style. And the style here dates back to the 12th century. Yes. Then all the houses on the wharf, they are of course protected by law, and since 1980 they are also on UNESCO's World Heritage List. Yes. And after this fire in 1955, they used this opportunity to do some archaeological excavations here. And then they found ruins dating back to the 12th century of parts of houses. And they left these paths they found, exactly where they found them, and they built a modern museum up around them. And if you look to your right, you can see this modern museum. It's called the Museum of Medieval Archaeology. And then we have this the church where we started the sightseeing, St. Mary's Church. And it was the only church in Norway which has this two-towered west facade.
Well, and now we do say goodbye.
Yeah.
we
So
say
say we.
goodbye
So say
to
we.
Bergen, and we're going to ski on down the road, as it were.
Yeah, speaking of skiing, Marv, Carol was talking about going to school with buses and stuff. But you know, in the olden days, golly, it just shows you how much stress and how much education, how important education was to the Norwegians. Because when the little kids or the kids were going to school, they were picked up often by what they call a chain gang, and these would be a big kid in the front and a big kid in the back, and they had a rope, and all the little kids would get in the middle, and they would be guided to school by hanging on to this rope, and then they would go ahead and ski, and then the bigger boys had to watch out for the little ones because they could drop and they wanted to sit down because, you know, it was hard going. And if they did that, then of course they'd go to sleep. So they were frozen ears and noses and cheeks, and it was often necessary to rub their skin with snow until the blood circulated again. And this was to go to school for an education. Now, if I was their mother at that time, I would have been scared to death to let my kid go out like that, huh?
Yeah, but if you were the mother, you probably did the same thing. When you were a kid,
when
right?
I was a kid.
Sure.
But isn't that
something.
interesting?
That is, yeah, that really is.
Yeah.
Well, it just shows you how important education is to the Norwegians. We're going to find out a little bit more, too. Some of the people ask questions, hey, what about mining and that type of things in Norway?
But we have had a production of silver, or mined for silver, but it has become too expensive. The wages are too high. So I guess we still have a little bit of gold and a fair amount of silver in our mountains, but we can't afford to mine it.
Is that a mine?
Here you can see where they've taken out this white stone. Take a look to the right. And here's where they grind it, part of it, to the left.
Well, what Carol is talking about here, we see this white stone or this white rock. That white rock is mixed in with the asphalt and is put in on the highways and also on the landing strips at the airports, because it has a reflective quality to it, and that way it's easier when the light catches it. You can really see where the road is or where the runway is. So that's pretty clever with what they're doing with that. And then you notice now, Biddy, of course, we are getting into that area where we're seeing more and more waterfalls, and we're going to be seeing this now for quite some time. To me, this was absolutely just incredible. Incredible.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I'm looking for the right words, right?
I knew you were. I know. It is hard to find it.
It
really
is.
isn't the adjectives to describe what you see.
It's look at. I mean, you can, and as we keep going down the road, and then later on when we get into the Sognefjord and we take our cruise down, you can't count them. I mean, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. But you were talking a little bit about schooling, and Carol's going to explain a little bit more to us about schooling in Norway.
If you're wondering what they used to do in the little farms with their children that had to be sent to school, well, in the old days, the children would have to make their way down from the farms in the mountains, usually down to a body of water, and there row themselves or be rowed into the nearest larger town, village. There they would lodge with people in the town. During the school years, they would have to stay close to the school and then only come home for the holidays. As soon as they came home, of course, they were set to work at the farm. Today, they don't have to stay away from their parents for that long. They are taken usually by school buses. They're picked up by school buses and taken to school and brought back. In certain cases, they still have a fair walk, though, from where the point of pickup is for the school bus, but they don't have to leave home any longer. Every other day, if you were in an area where there was a school and there were farms in the vicinity, then the children would go to school maybe only twice or 3 times a week, and the rest of the time they would be helping in the farm. Here we are, Gudvangen, God's Acre. A couple of years ago they built these 2 pavilions with, of course, a souvenir shop.
Well, here we are at last at Sonja Fjord. This is exciting, isn't it, Betty?
Yeah, it is. It's dramatic.
This is quite a bit of traffic that's going to get on this ferry boat or the boat. Yeah, it's a ferry boat because
Ferry boat, sure.
it goes from village
It
to
ferries
village.
you from one place to the next.
That's right. It does do that. And now we can see these steep cliffs, and of course the wonderful waterfalls that are just all around us here. This is something. You can see what the glaciers did here, can't you?
Absolutely. You know, this is like you've imagined it was going to be like ever since you took National Geographic or read books in school about the fjords. I don't say fjords like you do, but it's, you know what I'm talking about. But we knew that, I mean, the steep cliffs and the waterfalls and the green and the cold.
And the cold. Yeah, well, it wasn't really too bad this day. It was a little overcast this day, and it did rain part of the day. But when you get out there, you want to make sure that you've got a windbreaker on anyway when you get out here, because this weather sometimes, as we saw down in Bergen, can change, and it can change rather fast.
But we do that on all our trips, telling people bring a jacket, because even in the summertime they make the buildings so cold sometimes that you want to put a jacket of some kind on. So it's just common sense to come prepared.
Did you ever see so many beautiful waterfalls in your life?
No.
Isn't this
No.
something? It's just it really is absolutely breathtaking. As
Water,
you see
water
this.
everywhere, but we have drops to drink.
You will have drops to drink,
Uh-huh.
right? And look, way up there on the top, and these waterfalls start way up there, of course, as you can see, and they just keep coming on down and coming on down. And as we get onto the ship, we will be traveling through Sonja Fjord, and we'll see, of course, much more in the way of waterfalls too.
Well, in a couple of hundreds of thousands of years, oh, not that much real. Well, these will be much bigger, much wider, much deeper, because water is such a force of erosion.
And you can see the events of that right here as well. Yeah, it's something. Well, we haven't gotten right on the ship yet, but we're going to. And of course, as Carol told us, there's a souvenir shop right as we get on the way. And,
You know, we should have taken your picture with your great grandfather there.
You think that's what he looked like?
Well,
huh?
we could.
Could
Very
have been.
handsome. It was like you, Marv.
Could have been. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, that may have been fashioned right after him. Who knows? I don't think
Just
so.
joking.
But I don't
Just
know.
joking.
Yeah. No pictures back that far back in history. But look at this water, how beautiful it is, and how calm it is at this particular stage of the trip. And we get a little bit.
It's like a little
bit
inlet there. Well, of course, it squeezes. They squeeze there together, so it makes it probably less turbulent.
This is the ship that we're going to get on now. It doesn't. Again, these.
What is it, Marv?
The ship that we're
Yeah,
going to get
what?
on. The ship.
Well, I thought we called it a ferry boat.
Well, it's still a ship. Yeah. Anyway, it's surprising to see that you can, that all of that traffic and is going to be able to be put on there. So that's the thing that really amazed me as we lined up there with the buses and the trucks and the cars, and of course so many people. This was in July, so many people that were on vacation that had their cars and their. Some of their
Motorhomes.
campers, on that, and then there were some people that just walked on too, because some of those were going to some of the other little villages along the way,
There's no crowding on this, though. You know, this one has to go on, and then the other one, because it all has to be evened out. And you they do.
They do
in
that.
the traffic today, boom.
Right. Well, now we're going to be welcomed aboard the ship.
Welcome on board the ferry to Kaupanger and Lavdal. The crossing takes about 2 hours to Kaupanger and 3 hours to Lavdal. There is a cafeteria service on board. For your personal safety, we remind you that smoking is not allowed on car deck, open decks, corridors, or lounges where no smoking signs are posted. If an emergency situation should occur, please attend to the information given on the vessel's public announcement system.
And of course, that was the public announcement system. As we go through the Sonja Fjord here, and we look at nature, boy, in such a beautiful array. And we were talking earlier about trolls, and trolls, the fairy tales, and all of these legends, a lot of them came from the Old Norse folk tradition. I can see how some of this happens because, when it gets a little bit dark and it gets a little bit dusk, and you look at some of the old trees and things like that in these mountains, you could visualize a troll or a monster, that type of thing. Couldn't you?
Those glaciers shaped those peaks in so many crazy-looking shapes that they really would provoke images of trolls and other supernatural spirits. I mean, especially in the evening or dusk, and you see all these coming at you.
No, it's true. It's
well, their trolls aren't good.
Well, some of the stories that they wrote later on, I think, some of them were. But anyway, a lot of these folk tales and the trolls found their way into literature. In fact, when Henrik Ibsen wanted to portray the dark side of the Norwegian character in his play in Peer Gynt, he employed trolls. And when the Mountain King asked Peer Gynt what the difference is between man and troll, the ambitious Peer Gynt unhesitatingly he replied, "There's very little." The Mountain King retorts, "Among men, the saying goes, man to yourself be true. And here among us trolls, the saying runs, troll to yourself be enough." Anyway, Peer Gynt made a pact, with the spirits and pays the price. However, there's also certain kindliness about Norwegian trolls. They are terrifying and powerful, but also are supposed to be very stupid and can easily be overpowered by an agile, quick-witted youth or a brave soldier. We therefore, read the stories with a mixture of fear and also delight. But they always end happily for the disobedient human being who stands up to the trolls, and contains plenty of homely wit and good-natured fantasy and a lot of humor too. But the origin of these fairy tales are difficult to pinpoint today. Legends and fairy tales migrate between countries and between continents, and everywhere they take hold, they acquire the local coloring and the linguistic form. And of course, in Norway, the fairy tales were undoubtedly combined with the Old Norse legends and similar motifs from heroic sagas. And you can believe, as some of the Vikings came back and probably heard stories from other parts of Europe or other parts of the world, that some of these things were probably incorporated with the Old Norse tales, I suspect. So, but just looking at beautiful nature during the daytime, you wouldn't think of anything just so horrible and hideous as a troll. But as soon as dark time comes, a different story.
Everybody goes to bed early, or did. I don't think it's this way
not
now,
anymore.
But
right.
in the olden days, my gosh, you'd go and you'd sure watch out for your kids.
Yeah.
You know what those? I was scared. The boogeyman's going to get you. Like
or the
we
troll's going to be after
watch
you,
out!
right?
The trolls are going to get you.
Anyway, it's a lot of fun to read the stories, of course, about the trolls, and we might have a chance to read some of those a little bit later on too. But this is just about all the time that we have today. If you're interested in any of the trips that we have, give Betty a call at
488-7443.
And Betty, you have some great trips coming up, right?
I sure do.
So give her a call, and she'll be happy to give you all that information. It's time for us to say goodbye. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.